Followers of Jesus have gathered to symbolically wash each other's feet, to remember that humble service lies at the heart of the gospel message. I would invite the 12 and also our headmaster, acting in Jesus' servant role, to please come forward.
For this Easter Oration, I'm going to confine myself to just one question, to addressing just one question. But this question contains a paradox. So I need everyone's attention because, as a lot of you may know, a paradox is a statement that appears contradictory or even absurd, but on closer examination contains a profound truth. So a paradox is a statement that appears contradictory or absurd, but on closer examination it contains a profound truth. So here's the question. Why are young people experiencing record levels of loneliness, anxiety and depression as the health, wealth and life expectancy of Australians increases? Or to put it another way, why is it that as Australians become healthier, wealthier and live longer, are young people paradoxically experiencing severe mental health problems? Now, a recent study from last year by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare said that nearly 1 in 5 young Australians between the ages of 16 and 24 have suffered a mental health problem in the last year. So it's a very current survey. Critics have given 4 reasons for this. 1, the long COVID lockdown, that occurred not that long ago. I'm sure a lot of you can remember this. Secondly, the technological revolution of the last 20 years. So, on average, adolescents spend 5.5 hours on screens per day. Thirdly, the precarious capitalist gig economy. So a lot of you will do a degree at university and will feel that this won't actually lead to any permanent or at least secure employment. And lastly, there's this threat of the psychological stress, I guess, that arises when the media promote the threat of imminent environmental collapse, or that we've reached this tipping point. Now, although these 4 factors are really important, today I'm going to argue that the decline in mental health among young people is primarily a problem of culture. It's primarily a problem of culture. And what does culture mean? So culture is one of the hardest words to define. Anthropologists in 1952 gave 152 different definitions of culture. But to try and make sense of Western culture today, I'm going to confine myself to one definition that I use when I teach at Melbourne University. So I'll just go through. Culture are the customs, norms, rules and behaviour that we take for granted that help us to make sense of the world. The customs, norms, rules and behaviour that come upon us that make sense of every single experience we have in the world. They come across naturally. They're as easy as breathing in air. So a lot of us don't know the actual culture we're immersed in. We just take it for granted. Now, I believe that the highest values in Western culture can be traced back to 3 historical figures. Namely, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, the leader of the Reformation Martin Luther, and the political economist Karl Marx. Now, you might think that's a motley collection of people, but stay with me. So firstly, Socrates, by using rational inquiry to question fundamental values such as justice, truth and love, Socrates prioritised reason over instincts and emotion. He prioritised reason over instincts and emotion. He was appalled that the great playwrights of his time said that they wrote their plays using their instincts rather than rational processes. This rationalist approach set the West on a path to set apart the mind from the body. Secondly, Martin Luther's distrust of large church institutions and the priesthood shifted the weight from religious responsibility onto the individual, or shifted the weight onto individual shoulders, encapsulated in his rallying cry, sola fide, by faith alone. The emphasis on alone laid the foundation for modern individualism, moving away from collective responsibility. So we're individually responsible for our own spiritual welfare. And lastly, Karl Marx, famously upturned spiritual understandings of existence in favour of a material worldview based on power and class struggles, reducing religion to an opiate of the people that would be unnecessary when perfect equality was achieved. The ideas put forward by these three figures, we can, in a nutshell, see them as being rationalism, individualism, and materialism, have shaped a Western culture that prioritises power, scientific materialism, and individual freedom, but neglects spiritual and communal aspects of life. Some of you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with individual responsibility and scientific materialism? Haven't they led to progress? Well, since the Age of Enlightenment, the West has been part of a 500-year experiment, where while inventing the wonders of the modern world, things such as penicillin and air travel, we have at the same time created a culture that attempts to live without a spiritual nature. We are the only culture or society, or at least one of the few cultures or society, that has attempted to do this. So how does all this relate to an increase in anxiety, depression, and loneliness among young people today in Australia? Well, the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, some of you may have heard of him, said the gods have become diseases. The gods have become diseases. Meaning that in the West, the rise in mental health problems is a direct result of not acknowledging our inherent religious and spiritual nature. Jung argued it's not possible to extract spirituality from human existence without profound consequences. While we all need material things, such as air, food, and water, our lives derive meaning from the spiritual. We wither if we do not have this, and our behaviour becomes sick. But again, what is spirituality? Like the term culture, spirituality is also difficult to define, especially as it often relates to subjective spiritual states that have been marginalised in our current materialistic culture. But having said this, I can think of two really dominant forms of spirituality today that some of you may recognise. Wellness spirituality, practices like mindfulness, and nature spirituality. So, wellness spirituality focuses on personal growth and inner peace through practices such as mindfulness, encouraging individuals to treat wellness as a self-managed task, much like a fitness regime. Some of you will have had Fitbits, or at least seen them. You put them around your wrist, you measure if you've had a productive sleep, you measure how many steps that you've taken in a particular day, and ultimately they're going to be used to measure your so-called spiritual well-being. In this way, wellness spirituality is rooted in New Age culture and places responsibility for well-being entirely on your own individual shoulders, framing failure as a personal shortcoming. In contrast, nature spirituality idealises a harmonious connection with the natural world, romanticising it as a refuge from human suffering brought on by civilization. The belief is critiqued in the film and book some of you might have seen or watched this, A Picnic at Hanging Rock, where the dark unconscious forces of the Australian landscape consume the naive Victorian schoolgirls, challenging the notion of nature as purely benevolent. In a similar way, the 1960s counterculture, with its return back to nature with the hippies, and epitomised in Timothy Leary's catch cry, "Turn on, tune in, drop out," led to a harmful isolation and disengagement from community. Therefore, I believe that wellness and nature spirituality do not offer a meaning counterpoint to contemporary Western culture. They are either too individualistic, materialistic, or rationalistic. So what's the way forward? There have been two key moments in my life that have forced me to reflect on spiritual dimensions of human nature, particularly the aspects that are often overlooked in our culture today. The first was climbing Mount Sinai during a visit to Egypt when I was in my early 20s. This is where Moses got given the Ten Commandments from God, something my Western rational worldview did not believe at the time. Yet, as I reached the summit of Mount Sinai at sunrise, after an exhausting all-night ascent up a rocky path, awe displaced disbelief. The silence that surrounded me, the warm breeze and the dazzling desert starlight informed me that I was in a sacred place, As I climbed the final giant steps, 3,750, carved into the rock as penance by a monk. And to feel the sheer size of Mount Sinai towering above the desert landscape, how could I possibly see myself as an individual tourist in an exotic setting? I was the Son of God going up into the black heavens to have the word revealed to me. I was surprised I felt this way. It seemed, without being consciously aware of it, I just participated in a significant collective ritual connected to my Judeo-Christian heritage. The second spiritual experience came in a much more mundane setting, something some of you may recognise. 24 hours before an essay was due, I worked relentlessly throughout the night, driven to the edge of my capabilities. Time seemed to disappear as I became absorbed in every sentence, working intently to make many of my disparate ideas and themes come together. When the essay finally came together at dawn, a strange sense of well-being washed over me, despite the exhaustion. I felt something deeply spiritual, as if I had transcended my material concerns in that long, sleepless night. So what are the common characteristics of these two experiences? They both involve stepping outside of everyday linear time and into darkness, a lack of food and sleep, mental or physical exertion, and a feeling I was doing something transformative and significant. Much like the foundational figures in religion, such as Moses and Jesus, my spiritual experience arose when I stepped outside of my comfort zone and was transformed, much like base metals are only transformed when they experience intense pressure. And it is not just religious figures who seek uncomfortable spiritual transformation. This is also true of prophets, great artists, and political dissidents. Think of Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, Van Gogh and Kurt Cobain. Think of Alexei Navalny, the Russian dissident who Putin poisoned just over a year ago. As we approach Easter, it's worth noting that all these disparate figures I've just mentioned share one striking similarity with Jesus. They faced extreme trials that led to the creation of something powerful and unique, blazing with dark spiritual intensity. Rather than focusing on comfort and well-being or escaping into nature, they sought to serve humanity. In a Western culture that worships longevity, it's significant that neither Jesus nor the prophets or the artists or dissidents I mentioned lived long lives. So to return to the paradoxical question with which I began, I suggest that if longevity, health, wealth, wellness and nature spirituality are paradoxically exacerbating mental health problems among the young, in Australia, there needs to be room for a third and more challenging type of spirituality that I call dark spirituality. Now, dark is an acronym. It stands for difficult, ambiguous, revelatory, and kinetic. And maybe the best way to understand dark spirituality is to think in terms of the Easter ritual you're taking part in today. So firstly, D of dark spirituality stands for difficulty. And when life challenges you, burn brightly, without concern for tomorrow. Do not shy away from difficult situations or the darkness that is best represented by Good Friday, when Jesus suffered for the sake of others and did not prioritise his individual power and comfort and well-being. Secondly, do not try and avoid the A of dark spirituality, ambiguity. This is necessary for all spiritual transformation. Despite what religious fundamentalists may think, certainty is spiritual suicide. Certainty is spiritual suicide. Jesus was not free from ambiguity and doubt in the days before he died. This is what makes him both human and spiritual. Think of his cry on the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Thirdly, do not follow contemporary Western culture and dismiss the R in dark spirituality. Revelatory moments, when they come to you, are more than mere coincidences or mental malfunctions. They are meaningful in a way that your rational mind cannot understand. Jesus' crucifixion itself is one such revelation, a paradox where death equals life and where suffering becomes the source of redemption. Living in a culture that values rationality as the highest value, it is easy to ignore such paradoxical moments. But as we shall see today, these moments contain profound truths. Lastly, do not disassociate from your community and friends. Take part in the K in dark spirituality, kinetic engagement. Like a moth that is still in darkness and springs to life only when the light turns on, human beings run on kinetic energy that is activated by external stimuli. For all of us introverts out there, this is perhaps the hardest thing to accept. When I was asked to speak here today, a part of me wanted to run in the opposite direction. And yet here I am. My physical body, I reason, is just a conduit for a larger spiritual message that needs to be shared despite my personal discomfort. Jesus' own life exemplified this principle. His ministry was one of deep engagement with others, reaching out and embracing the suffering that came with it. And now finally we can answer the paradoxical question, a question that I believe holds a profound truth. The rise in anxiety, depression and loneliness among young people in Australia stems from a lack of meaningful spiritual challenges in our culture. Instead, contemporary Western culture contributes to the growing health crisis by prioritising comfort, longevity, rationality, individual power and material wealth above anything else. I believe that dark spirituality, difficult, ambiguous, revelatory and kinetic, offers a startling solution to this predicament. One that invites us not to shy away from sleepless nights and difficult trials, to dance on the edge of rationality and to seek purpose beyond individual material comfort. Jesus' challenging question, "What shall it profit a man if he gains the world but loses his soul?" shows us the danger of a solely individualistic, materialistic worldview. Therefore, it's time to embrace this dark spirituality.